Hi, welcome to another edition of Mic Drop. Today I want to address the topic of when your partner rejects you. Many of us have been in relationships where we found ourselves to be in a position where maybe someone that we've been dating, someone that we've been getting to know, finally decides that they do not want to continue to be in the relationship. They do not want to continue dating us. Or they have maybe come to a realization or a conclusion the relationship is not going to work for them. So often that leaves us feeling rejected, feeling like we have to question ourselves. Maybe we're not good enough. Maybe we messed up or we did something that turned the other person off. And that altogether puts us in a position where we may begin to question or doubt ourselves and say, is there something I could have done differently? Is there something I could have said or could have done in a different way that might have prevented the relationship from coming to an end? Well, this is precisely why it's important for us to reflect on this topic. We all come to relationships with an expectation. We have the expectation of being accepted and also of fulfilling a dream or an aspiration that we hold, that this is going to be a successful relationship, that this is going to have a particular or specific end or resolution. And when that doesn't happen, we feel disappointed. We feel like we may have failed ourselves in fulfilling or accomplishing that goal or that aspiration that we had set for ourselves. We can also take it as a personal attack. We can feel like maybe we're being devalued and somehow it makes us feel maybe guilty or ashamed that the relationship did not work. And one of the things that we first need to understand is that it takes two to be in a relationship, and we have no control over the other person's ultimate decision to continue or to give up on the relationship. So that's another important matter to take into consideration. We also may find ourselves in a situation of feeling emotionally vulnerable, feeling like we are exposed. We maybe took a risk and it didn't pan out to be what we had expected. And we should always bear in mind that all relationships always involve a certain level of risk. There's no relationship, there is no exchange of affection with someone else without a certain margin of risk. Every relationship involves a certain level of risk. So, and in many cases, this ought to be a calculated risk, but it isn't always so. And we may find ourselves in a situation where the outcome isn't necessarily what we had anticipated. So that puts us in a situation of vulnerability, that ultimately there isn't also a bond without vulnerability, because vulnerability is a connection that we establish at the level of the soul, and it requires for us to be vulnerable, and it also requires for us to be authentic. So again, all relationships involve a level of risk and also of vulnerability. We also may find ourselves feeling like in being confronted with a truth, and there's an ultimate truth to be acknowledged here, and that is that we may not always get what we want. Just like the song says, you can't always get what you want. And even though that might be a hard pill to swallow, it is true. And we do need to acknowledge that. Once we acknowledge that there's a give and take and that we may or may not always accomplish what we want, that kind of allows us to be grounded, to be confronted with truth, with honesty, and to say, you know, there is a certain level of gamble in a relationship. So it kind of lays the ground rules, the rules of the game, and it allows us to then be more clear about what we're getting ourselves into. We also need to understand not the fact that someone doesn't want to be in a relationship with you doesn't necessarily mean that you are someone of less worth. It doesn't mean that you're not a good person, that you are someone of less value. That's an important thing to understand, because sometimes we believe that because someone chose not to be in a relationship with us, that is a direct reflection on our worth as a person, and that's definitely not true. We may or may not have a match with the person that we explored the relationship with, but the fact that it did not work out or it did not succeed with this person doesn't necessarily mean that you are less worthy of being loved or being in a relationship. It just means that the two of you did not have a good match, a good bond. I think of like when we're shopping for jewelry, or if we're shopping for a ring, you may try on different pieces and some may fit better or may suit you better than others. But the fact that one doesn't fit doesn't mean that you're not someone worthy of carrying a piece of jewelry. It just means that the particular piece you tried on was not a good match for you. That's it. So if we think of relationships in the same way, then it may also allow us to be a lot more graceful and understanding with ourselves, and to understand that because it did not work with one person does not mean that you should not keep trying with other people. It also teaches us that that there is a level of match and affinity that must exist in a relationship with a person in order for it to succeed. And we may be more suited or more suitable to be in a relationship with one person than with another. And that's just our nature. That's part of our DNA. We might have a greater chemistry with someone than we do with somebody else. And that's just because we're all unique. And two sets of people might have greater synchronicity. There might be a greater energy, a greater flow of affection and complicity than with somebody else. And that's just a reality as well of how we function as human beings. Also, someone who may have rejected you today may later on down the line change their mind, and maybe being at a different place mentally or emotionally, it may be this a relationship that did not work at one stage might work later on down the line, being at a different stage. For example, my wife and I met when we were in high school, and we dated over 30 something years ago. We went our separate ways after high school. The relationship ended for different reasons. We were at the beginning of starting college, and then we encountered each other many years later, both being divorced, both being single again, and we discovered that the same chemistry that we had when we were teenagers and finishing high school and starting college was still there. And we then reignited the relationship, and then dated, and then married each other. So I use that just as an example, being the one that I'm most familiar with, and just to illustrate the point that the relationship that didn't seem to work 30 something years ago did work many decades later on, when we were both at different places, we were at different levels of maturity, and we were at a different stage in our life. And the same thing may happen to you. Also, when you're enamored, when you're in that initial stage of the relationship, where there's infatuation, when you're fascinated with each other, that may not be the most appropriate time to make long-term decisions, because when you're initially enamored, when you're initially enthralled by this passion at the beginning of a relationship, you may miss out, or you might have some blind spots and not really see the full picture, and you might just find yourselves completely captured by the moment, by the romance of the moment. And that's something that may prevent you from being able to fully appreciate and value who you have before you, who you have in front of you. So we do need to not rush, to not make hasty decisions, because it may take some time to fully process the opportunity and to fully make sense of the relationship that we are exploring, and who we're with, and how well we work or not together. Ultimately, if someone chooses not to be with you, a very important thing we do need to bear in mind is the fact that this person is the one who's missing out on the opportunity to get to experience being in a relationship with you. So if someone chooses not to be with you, they too are missing out. And you shouldn't feel guilty, you shouldn't feel less worthy, less valuable, less deserving of being loved, simply because someone chose not to take that opportunity with you. Someone else might come down the line who will appreciate you, and who will consider it worth the effort to work at a relationship with you. And it's important that we understand that we often interpret these circumstances based on our own beliefs, that we may have certain set ideas in our minds about what makes a relationship worth working on, who is someone worth dating, who who measures up to our expectations of a good partner, of a good man, of a good woman, and we have a certain level of filters set in the midst of our beliefs, the beliefs that we have installed in our minds, that assist us and sometimes limit us in the way that we assess the viability of a relationship. So let's also bear in mind that we bring a certain level, a lens, or a certain level of filter through which we assess and value or evaluate a relationship. And all of these things may help us in processing a potential rejection that we may have experienced in a relationship. Again, I want you to walk away with the notion that you are the treasure, that you are the one worth holding on to. And if someone does not value you, that does not mean that because that person was not able to fully see you and appreciate you, it doesn't mean that someone else might not be able to do it in a much better way. I hope this is helpful in helping you to process and to understand how we manage a relationship, how we manage being in a situation where someone rejects us, and let's also just allow ourselves to continue to reflect and to process these situations when we experience them. I hope this was helpful, and I invite you to, if you want to have a one-on-one session to be able to process this topic or any other topic in a counseling situation, you may do so by setting up an appointment by contacting me at my office at the number that's also featured on the WhatsApp platform, and the number is country code 506, and the number is 6186 3941. Again, country code 506, and the number is 6186 3941. You may also reach me via Instagram on my page, which is at WAlexGrant, and you may also reach me via Facebook on my page as Alex Grant, Consejero Familiar y Motivador. This presentation will remain on both Instagram, Facebook, and my YouTube channel. So I hope that you find it helpful, that you share it with other people that you believe might benefit from this information. And again, I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks for being here for another edition of Mic Drop, and I look forward to meeting again on Friday at noon CST time, and that we may continue to explore topics that will be helpful to you in your everyday life. Have a great weekend, and God bless.